The last night of Marie Antoinette. What happened in her cell? Paris, October 15th, 1793. A gray dawn hovered over the city. But inside the walls of the conciergerie prison, time had become something strange, elastic, oppressive. It no longer ticked with certainty. It bled. Marie Antoinette, once Queen of France, now merely prisoner 280, had spent the last 76 days confined in a stone cell just meters from the Seine. The thick, damp walls remembered laughter, betrayal, footsteps of revolution. But this night would be different. It would be her last. She was 40 years old, once draped in silks. Now she wore a plain white chemise. Her hair, once powdered and styled high with jewels and feathers, had been crudely cut, not for shame, but for the blade. The guillotine required it. But before that moment came, there was a night. Her cell, was narrow, windowless, stone floor, a straw mattress, a wooden stool. That was all. She was not alone. 2 guards were assigned to stay inside the room with her at all times, watching her even as she slept, if she managed to sleep at all. Privacy was stripped from her as surely as her crown had been. A tallow candle flickered on the small table. The air smelled of mildew, damp wool, and iron. Somewhere in the hallway beyond the thick wooden door, water dripped rhythmically, tick, 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 like a cruel reminder. She had once hosted masquerade balls, dined with Mozart, walked gilded halls, and now she sat on the edge of a prison cot, hands folded in her lap, waiting. Her final trial. Just hours earlier, she had stood before the Revolutionary Tribunal. It was not a trial. It was a sentence with theater. The charges were many: treason, conspiring with foreign powers, depleting the national treasury, and, most outrageously, corrupting her own son. That final accusation brought a flicker of rage, even to those who had hated her. The boy Louis Charles had been manipulated to say anything the revolutionaries wished. Marie Antoinette, upon hearing his testimony, did not respond to the court. Instead, she stood tall, turned to the women in the gallery, and said only, "If I have not replied, it is because nature itself refuses to answer such a charge against the mother." Even some of her enemies lowered their eyes. By nightfall, the verdict was clear: death at dawn. A letter she was never allowed to send. That night, she asked for pen and paper. She wrote a letter, a farewell to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. It was calm, clear, and full of grace. She spoke not of vengeance, nor of "I forgive all my enemies the harm they have done me. I leave with no hatred in my heart." But the letter never reached Elizabeth. It was intercepted by revolutionary authorities. Only centuries later was it discovered, tucked away in a forgotten archive. The final hours. What does a person do on their last night alive? She did not scream. She did not beg. Witnesses said she prayed quietly. Her hands trembled only once, when she mentioned her children. Louis Charles, her son, had been taken from her. He was held in solitary confinement in another part of the prison, made to forget his mother, his name, his identity. Her daughter, Marie Therese, still lived, but was forbidden to see her. The silence of the night was almost unbearable. At one point, the prison clock struck midnight. One of the guards coughed. Another shifted in his chair. Marie Antoinette. There are stories, perhaps apocryphal, that she kissed a crucifix, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, "My God, give me strength." Not as a queen, not even as a mother, but simply as a soul. The final morning, October 16th, 1793. A knock on the cell door came at 4:30 in the morning. Marie Antoinette had not slept. The candle had burned low. She rose without a word. The guards stood aside. A woman entered, Rosalie Lamorlière, the young servant who had quietly attended her in prison. She helped the former queen dress, a plain white underdress, stockings, a bonnet to cover her cut hair. No jewels, no perfume, no dignity left to carry, but that which came from within. There was no mirror in the cell. Marie Antoinette didn't ask for one. A request denied. Before leaving, she asked for a priest. But the revolution had abolished the church's authority. She was denied a final confession. In place of a priest, she received a young constitutional clergyman, one loyal to the new regime. She listened politely to his prayers, but it is said that she remained silent throughout, her hands folded tightly. The candle sputtered out behind her. The cart through Paris. She was led outside. The air was sharp with autumn cold. A cart stood ready, the same open wooden tumbril used to transport common criminals to the guillotine. There would be no covered carriage, no procession, just exposure. As she stepped onto the cart, her ankles wobbled slightly, but she caught herself. The crowd had already begun to gather. Word had spread. La Veuve Capet, the widow Capet, was on her way to die. For nearly an hour, the cart crawled through the streets of Paris. People lined the streets. Some jeered. Others stared in silence. A few even wept discreetly behind windows. She sat straight, hands bound behind her back, her eyes scanning the city that had once bowed before her. She looked not at the people, but over their heads, to the rooftops, to the sky. She did not cry. The steps to the scaffold. The guillotine stood at Place de la Révolution, now Place de la Concorde. As she climbed the wooden steps, her foot slipped, and she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. She looked up at him and said, calmly, clearly, "Pardon me, monsieur, I did not do it on purpose." Those would be her final words. There were no last speeches, no defiance, no drama. Just a woman who once ruled empires, now bowing her head. The executioner tied her hands behind her back again and led her to the plank. The blade was already raised. At exactly 12:15 p.m., the knife fell. It is said that the crowd fell momentarily silent, not in fear, not in pity, but in something they could not name: aftermath. Her body was taken to a nearby cemetery and buried in an unmarked grave. No ceremony, no marker. Nothing remained above the earth to tell the world who she had been. But in time, that silence grew loud. Myths began to swirl: that she had shown bravery, that she had repented, that she had whispered secrets before her death. In 1815, after the Bourbon monarchy was restored, her body was exhumed and reburied at the Basilica of Saint Denis, beside her husband, Louis XVI. A marble statue was raised, her name carved once more in stone. Legacy. History has not been kind to Marie Antoinette, or perhaps it has been too kind, turning her into myth. Some remember her as a symbol of waste and privilege, others as a scapegoat for a crumbling system, still others as a tragic figure caught in the machinery of revolution. But on that last night, and in those final hours, there was no throne, no revolution, no noise. There was only a candle, a prayer, a whispered apology to a man whose foot she had stepped on, and a final, quiet walk into history. Thank you for sitting by the fire with me tonight. History isn't always written by the victors. Sometimes it's written by those who dared to remember.